Stasa23 here. In today's knife therapy, we have the Civivi Knives Cetos. This knife comes in at $63.75 with 5 different variations. I'll start popping them up on the screen. First off is the one that you see here with the bead blast and the brown burlap micarta with the bead blast lock frame. You can also get it with a black wash blade, black lock side, and a black burlap micarta. You can get it with a black wash blade, black lock side with green burlap micarta, and you can get it with a bead blasted blade with a bead blasted lock side with a wood show side scale, or you can get it with a Damascus blade with a twill carbon fiber show scale and a black lock side. That one right there is going to cost you $99.50. All right, so let's get some specs out of the way real quick so you have an idea of the size of the knife. You have a total length of 7.99 inches, blade length of 3.46 inches with a cutting edge of 3.2 inches, a grip area from right behind that flipper tab to right here of 3.6 inches, a pretty slender handle scale thickness at 0.43 inches, and a closed width in the pocket from here to here of 1.18 inches, blade stock thickness of 0.12. You have a behind the edge thickness on my particular knife ranging from 23 to 24 thousandths, sharpened at 30 degrees per side. Now let's take a close look at this blade. This is what kind of attracted me to the knife because I love this blade shape. You have a nice bayonet grind here. I just think that's an attractive looking design. You have a nice top swedge that comes down to the tip, but you still have a decent bit of thickness into that tip, so you don't have to be too worried about that if you do, any kind of twisting around in some wood or something. You have a bead blasted finish, which I'm not too fond of. I wish they would stop using that. You do have a sharpening tool that does clear that plunge line and will give you some sharpening light before it starts to widen up in the back. I did sharpen it after the testing and I don't have any widening yet. You have dual fullers on the blade that we'll talk about later in the deployment in action. You have some jimping up top that is in the right spot for my medium-sized hands, and I'd call it medium traction jimping. It's not super fine cut like I would prefer. You do have a chamfer on both sides of that, so you don't have any peaks that are sharp or anything. And the blade steel on this one is 14C28N. Another thing that attracted to me to the knife, because I love 14C. It's an excellent budget steel, easy to sharpen, and you can get it ridiculously sharp. So why don't we see how well the Ceto performs. The factory edge came nice and sharp, so of course cardboard won't be any trouble for the knife. However, a hollow grind would have definitely made more sense in my opinion for this knife, or at least to thin out that factory edge bevel. At 30 degrees per side, that's way too thick because this is not suited for hard use in my opinion, and not really even a work knife. So definitely, 20 degree per side edge bevel would have been nice, but without a hollow grind, you'd had a very, very large bevel. Now on to testing the ergos with the Pine 2x4, and right away the thin and narrow scales were a little harder to grip, so I found myself squeezing them a lot harder to keep that handle from turning in my hand. And by the end of this test, my forearms were cramped up and very, very fatigued because of all that gripping tightly of that handle. And this is not the type of knife I would go to grab to do this type of work. Otherwise, the handle was nice and comfortable, no hot spots to speak of. I'm just showing that the handle was kind of spinning. Now we move on to the 1/2 inch twisted sisal rope. The blade shape is perfect for this type of cutting on a flat surface. However, once again, that thin handle was hard to hold securely, which made this test difficult. And not to mention that thick edge bevel, along with the edge not having a lot of bite to it, I struggled to get through 20 cuts of the sisal rope. By this point in the testing, I had developed a nice sized blister from those scales sliding back and forth in my hand. And the bead blasted scale lock frame also adds no texture to your grip, so you're going to be squeezing it a lot tighter if you're doing pressure type cutting. When I did this tubing, I noticed once again, like I do most of the times, that bead blast drags on side of there, kind of gives it a sticky feel. And also with a 30-degree edge bevel, it doesn't want to start this cut super quickly either. I do manage to get through all the testing. It just wasn't the easiest, and it definitely wasn't the most enjoyable. This knife kind of had me scratching my head because it just doesn't really make sense to me. If you like the way it looks and you're okay with everything I talk about, then that's fine. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It's like trying to be a gentleman's knife whilst trying to be a hard use knife. I don't know, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed that cutting footage. Now let's check out the deployment and action of the knife. First off, you have two different means of deployment. You have a very minimal flipper tab with fine cut jimping there. It does a good job of gripping the finger. Now, my detent is dialed nicely for both of them, but I have heard that some of them have stronger detents than others. But this, with the flipper tab, nice light switch will get it out. And if I want to build up some pressure, I can do a push button as well. You can also use these fullers to do a reverse flick if you'd like. And I can do it pretty reliably, and probably my favorite means of deployment. You could also slow roll it out with that forward fuller as well. The action's fairly snappy and pretty smooth, riding on a ceramic detent ball and ceramic cage ball bearings. Just a few, shakes, it'll go down. That's perfectly fine for me, especially for a budget knife. Now let's go on to the handle. You have contoured brown burlap micarta that I don't mind it. It doesn't offer any great traction. It's not slippery by any means, but it's not, like canvas and linen where they leave the material to where you can actually feel it. Burlap, you just pretty much feel the epoxy or whatever they're using there. They did do a good job, like I said, of contouring and softening the sides, so I didn't have any hot spots from the handle during the testing. You had the Civivi branded pivot here, T8 construction on the body and the pivot screws, and on the clip. Now, this is not the factory clip that comes with it. It comes with this standard bent stainless clip that is black. So I bought this milled titanium clip off of Amazon, and it does work properly. And I find it functions a little bit better because this bead blasted lock frame is kind of slick, so it holds it in the pocket a little bit better, in my opinion. Now let's check it out in the pocket. All right, I might have misspoke earlier. This is T6 on the pocket clip screws, and this is the color that goes with this knife, so I apologize for that. We'll say the knife does ride well in the pocket. It hugs this side, and that minimal flipper tab stays out of the way, even though it will kind of hit stuff if you do put other things in your pocket. Pretty much disappears in the pocket, and I like that. Let's turn it over. You have a flow-through construction, so if you want to blow it out with compressed air, wipe it out with a Q-tip to clean it out, you can. You have two standoffs in the back here with a lanyard post. I love that they didn't put a hole in there for a lanyard hole, so it keeps it nice and clean. Let's take a look in the inside to see what's going on there. You have no internal milling, and you have a thin piece of metal on the show side scale for rigidity. Now let's check it out on the scale. First off, in grams, we're sitting at 109.4 grams or 3.85 ounces, which is not bad, but it could have been better if you wouldn't have had the steel lock, frame lock. Now let's take a look at the lock. Your lockup is sitting at around, I'd say 60%. No side to side, no up and down. It's a solid lockup. The access to the lock bar, the lock is flush with the show side scale. They have a chamfer with a little bit of texture on the lock side, and you have a chamfer, a little chamfer on the scale, the show side scale. It's not terrible, but it's not the easiest to get to the lock bar. I use the fat of my thumb just to kick it over. The lock pressure on mine is about medium pressure. It's not super hard and it's not light either. Now for some quick size comparisons, pivot to pivot, we have the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Rat Model 2. It's right in between those two. However, the Cetos has about the same cutting edge as the Rat Model 1. These are great size references, the Kizer Towser K and the Civivi Button Lock Elementum. Very, very similar in overall feel and look to the Elementum button lock. It's about the same length as the Towser K, except you get a little bit more cutting edge on the Cetos. Lastly, we have the O-Knife Beagle and the Civivi Tarax. These are pretty good references as well. It's about the same overall length as the Tarax, about the same cutting edge as well, and it's a little bit larger than the O-Knife Beagle. All right, now for my nitpicks and complaints. First up, I would have loved to see them just do a regular stone wash. I can't stand a bead blast. It smudges. It more prone to corrosion, and it's just a cheap looking finish. Second, I think this knife has an identity crisis. You have this nice thin gentleman style look almost, but with like hard use features. You know, you have a flat grind here that is has a pretty robust edge at 30 degrees per side. That is extremely thick of an apex. So I would have loved to see this be a hollow grind. I think that would have made it perfect. Could have brought this down a lot thinner down here, and you could have went with like a 20 degrees per side edge bevel. That would have made it worlds better. Next, as far as this steel frame lock, when it's just a plain frame lock, I don't get it here. I think that should be reserved for more budget-friendly knives. Now, if you're trying to give it like a look like this, where you have a bolstered look with some steel, I kind of get it there. And this knife feels more balanced in hand. This one is weighty. The balance point is way back here in the middle, so it's not light in the hand. And it just wasn't enjoyable to use. So I don't like the steel frame lock here. I definitely think that was a miss. I would have loved this knife with these scales on both sides like they do with the liner lock, and a nice hollow grind on this blade, and I think this thing would have been outstanding. At the price point at $63, I don't think it's absurd. It's a quality built knife, but if you're looking for a super slicer or a good office carry type knife, I don't think this is going to be the best choice. I would go with the one that's coming out, I think, soon, the new Banneret. This would be something I would choose over this one, or another one that I would choose over it is the Civivi Button Lock Elementum. I love this knife. You know, I don't love the gravity style opening of it, but I love the performance and feel in hand. This one has a nice hollow grind, so we know they know how to do a good hollow grind. And this one also has the 14C 28-inch, so why not put it here? I also like to apologize if you hear all the background noise. There's people cutting grass, blowing their driveway, and my dog's going berserk like usual. So I apologize. So, wrong knife. So, you know, one that I'm going to recommend, probably not. You know, I don't think it's a bad knife. I just don't think I think there's better knives. That's what I'm trying to say here. So there you go. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them down below. I hope everybody's having an absolute amazing day. I will see y'all on the next one. Peace.